Have you ever really stopped to think about what's going on inside a language test? Beyond just the bubbles and the right or wrong answers? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the actual science of assessing grammar and vocabulary. Turns out it's about a whole lot more than just getting the answer right. It's about understanding what someone can truly do with a language. Let's jump in.
So, does this sound familiar? You've spent weeks cramming, you've memorized all of the verb conjugations, you absolutely ace the grammar section on your test. But then you find yourself standing in front of a real-life barista and nothing. You just freeze. It's so frustrating, right? That gap between knowing the rules on paper and actually using the language in the real world, that's the exact problem we're going to unpack today. So what's the fix? Well, it's all about a massive shift in perspective. Instead of thinking of language like some dusty old rule book, imagine it's more like a well-stocked toolkit. In this modern view, grammar and vocabulary aren't just things to memorize for a test. They're the actual practical tools you use to build conversations, to get your ideas across, and, to really connect with other people. Okay, so to really get our heads around this new way of thinking, we first have to totally redefine what we're even talking about when we say language ability. It's not about how many rules you can spit back from memory. No, it's something way deeper, way more dynamic, and a whole lot more useful. Let's break it down. First up, let's tackle grammar. Now, look closely at the words on this slide. Accurately, appropriately, and in context. Those are the keys right there. See, it's not enough to just be technically correct. You also have to choose the right grammatical structure for the right situation, for the right person, to get the right meaning across. So what does that actually look like? Well, you can think of it in 3 layers. At the bottom, you've got form. This is the nuts and bolts, right? Sentence structure, word order, all that stuff. Then you have meaning and use, which is understanding how changing those little nuts and bolts can completely change what you're saying, like conveying sarcasm or possibility. And at the very top, you have functional use. This is the real art form, using grammar to steer a conversation and make sure your point lands exactly how you want it to. And what about vocabulary? It's the same deal. It is absolutely not just a numbers game. I mean, having a huge list of words rattling around in your head is pretty useless if you don't know how and when to actually use them. Real vocabulary ability is about picking the perfect word for that perfect moment. And this slide really shows just how deep knowing a single word can be. First, there's its form. Can you say it and spell it? Then there's its meaning. And I don't just mean the dictionary definition. I mean the feeling it gives off. And finally, there's its use. Do you know which other words it likes to hang out with? And is it the right word for a formal essay? Or is it better for a quick text to a friend? It's a lot to juggle. All right, now that we have a better handle on ability, we're going to get into what is probably the single most important idea in all of language testing. Seriously, this is the big one. The difference between knowing about a language and being able to perform with it. This is a total game changer. Let me give you a super simple analogy. Language as knowledge is like being able to name every single part of a car's engine. You can point to the carburetor and the spark plugs. But language as ability, that's actually getting behind the wheel, starting the car, and driving it somewhere. See the difference? One is pure theory. The other is all about real-world performance. So if the goal is to measure someone's ability to actually drive the language, how do you do that? How do you test for performance, not just knowledge? Well, assessors have a toolkit with 3 main approaches. Let's open it up and see what's inside. And here they are, the 3 big tools in the box: discrete point, integrative, and performance-based. Now, each one gives us a different view, a different angle on language ability. And the best, smartest tests, they often use a clever mix of all 3. Let's start with the one you probably know best, discrete point testing. Think of language as a giant jigsaw puzzle. This type of test is like looking at every single puzzle piece one by one in isolation, but never seeing how they actually fit together to make the bigger picture. Yep, this is your classic multiple choice or fill-in-the-blank question. So what's the upside? Well, they're super objective and incredibly easy to score with a machine. But here's the catch. They tell you almost nothing about whether a person can actually use that piece of language in a real, messy, unpredictable conversation. Okay, so what's the next step up from just looking at single puzzle pieces? That brings us to integrative testing. This is where we start asking the test taker to actually connect a few of those pieces together. A classic example here is something called a cloze test. You know, where you have to fill in the missing words in an entire paragraph. It's a much better test because it forces you to use the surrounding context to figure out the answer, which is a lot closer to how we use language in real life. The downside? It's way more complicated to score fairly. And that brings us to the final tool in the kit, and honestly, the one that gets us the closest to real-world language use: performance-based assessment. With this one, we forget about the individual puzzle pieces entirely. Instead, we just ask you to build the whole picture yourself.
So this is where you're asked to write an essay, give a presentation, or have an actual conversation. It is all about what you can actively produce, what you can do with the language. It's by far the most authentic way to test, but it comes with a huge challenge. How do you grade something like that fairly and consistently for everyone? It's really tough. So there we have it, 3 very different tools in the assessment toolkit. The real secret to designing a good, valid language test is knowing exactly which tool to pull out for which specific job. It's all about matching the tool to the task. This little table really pulls it all together. You can see how it works, right? A simple multiple choice question is great for checking if you can just recognize something. A gap fill pushes you a little more into controlled production. A cloze test makes you integrate different skills. And then at the very top, a writing task tests your ability to use the language freely and appropriately. It's like a ladder of complexity. So why are we talking about all of this? Why does it even matter? Well, because a badly designed test can do more than just give a bad grade. It can actually steer teaching and learning in completely the wrong direction. So let's look at some of the most common ways tests get it wrong. And here are the usual suspects, focusing way too much on tiny, isolated grammar rules, forgetting to test language in a real, meaningful context. And the big one, thinking that knowing a lot of words is the same thing as having real vocabulary skill. These are the exact mistakes that lead us right back to that can't order a coffee problem we started with. So, if you take away one thing from all of this, let it be this. The bottom line is a truly good language test doesn't really care about how well you've memorized the rulebook. It cares about one thing and one thing only: your ability to use the language to make meaning. That's it. That is the true north of language proficiency. And that's the thought I really want to leave you with today. The next time you find yourself taking a language test, or maybe even designing one, just pause and ask yourself this one simple question. Is this thing measuring what I know, or is it measuring what I can actually do? Believe me, the answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know about what that test is really worth.